Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I am Barrett Sigma and this is Faeria. I want to talk about a card today that I think that needs to be redesigned, and that card is Icerock Behemoth. Icerock Behemoth is a card that I think is just really poorly designed. Obviously it's not very good in the meta right now, but its strength is not the main issue I have with it. The main issue I have with it is that it's not very representative of the two colors, red and blue, that it's a combination of. The other two color cards, such as Twin Soul Spirit, such as Crackthorn Beast, Soul Eater, those cards represent a combination of two colors well. And we'll talk about that a little bit, but I also don't like this card because it has such a boring effect, just plastering two keywords on it, taunt and protection. Whereas a lot of the other cards are very unique in the way that they have unique abilities, or they combine attributes of each of the colors in unique ways, or they just combine more of them, and that itself makes it more unique. But taunt protection, as I'll discuss, not very representative of blue and red. Its whole design is not very representative of blue and red, and it's not unique in any way. So in this video, I'm going to be talking about why I think the other two color cards represent the combination of two colors better. We'll talk about the themes of each color in general, and I'll talk about ways I think it should be redesigned. So changing the text so that it better fits blue and red, is more unique, has more unique effects. And I did make a Reddit post about this that got some great responses, so I'm going to talk about some of the suggestions that other users on Reddit made. I'll put a link down to the description of that Reddit discussion in case you want to read that. But let's just hop right into it. So I'm going to again describe the themes of each of the colors and why I think that the two color cards, such as Soul Eater, it fits well as a combination of those two colors, besides of course Icerock Behemoth. So let's start with green. So green, obviously the main thing it has going for it is buffing stats. So I'm just going to take a drink of water. But the buffing of stats, there are cards that are just buffs themselves, so like Runin's Guidance, Elderwood Embrace. These are cards that just buff a friendly creature. I guess you could buff an enemy creature, but usually you buff your own creature. There are cards that die to buff a friendly creature. There are creatures that buff other creatures as a gift. There are creatures such as Spirit of Rebirth that buffs creatures in your hand or other creatures in more unique ways. And there are cards that buff themselves, such as Runin the Relentless whenever it dies, or Wild Avenger whenever you take damage, or Oakfather based on how many forests you control. And one of the main legendaries, such as Eridon, which gives a buff to everything in your deck, or Tethra, which gives a massive buff on one thing, are all things that just, that's their thing. That's what green does. They buff the stats, giving attack and health, usually more health than attack. But regardless, health and attack to friendly creatures. Alright, moving on to blue. Blue has quite a few more attributes than green, but usually has a fewer cards that representative of those attributes. So first thing that I think is the most powerful and thing that represents blue the most is jump. There's a card that gives jump. There's a card that buffs the next jump creature you play. There's a card that gives you jumping frogs, a card that transforms something into a jumping frog, a card that can get jump based on certain conditions. Snowstorm Lancer is a very powerful jump creature. It can work with events as well. That's not really a blue thing. And Ninja Toad is a very powerful jump card. There are also cards that either directly or indirectly benefit off of jump. So for example, Wave Crush Colossus doesn't directly benefit off of jump, but it costs one less for each time you've harvested from an enemy well, which is made a lot easier with the jump mechanic, or having creatures that have jump. Another thing that blue has going for is land manipulation. Has quite a few cards that can move land, so that you can get usually in a better spot, such as Shifting Tide and what's the other one? Prophet of Tides, which has been recently nerfed, but still does the same thing. It moves land, so land manipulation is definitely a blue attribute. Another thing is creation and transformation. So we have things like Egg of Wonders, Aurora's creation. Both of these, in different ways, create cards. We have Frogify, which transforms a creature into a frog with jump. Very good hard removal card. We have things like Ludwan, which again creates cards for you, or Battletoads, which creates frogs for you. And we have a very powerful transformation effect, such as Mirror Phantasm, which transforms anything you want into another Mirror Phantasm, which can be a very powerful debuff on enemy creatures or a powerful buff on your own creatures. And Orisay, of course, which is like a massive, a mass transformation kind of effect. And he also used to have a card called, was it Unbound Elemental? I forgot. It's what Failed Experiment replaced. It used to be a card that you could target a creature, and it would cost, it would transform into a creature that costs 2 more, a random creature that costs 2 more. Creation, Transformation, Land Manipulation, and Jump are definitely all blue attributes. Going into red, the most obvious thing with red is damage, is dealing raw damage either to creatures or structures, such as with Firebomb, or just anything including the face with Flame Burst. There are creatures and structures and effects that deal damage to your opponent's orb in various ways, such as Bloodsinger, or with Flamethrower dealing damage to the board, or Grimguard as a combat ability dealing damage to your opponent, Groundshaker dealing damage to everything, Firestorm dealing AoE damage, and then the two of the main legendaries, Ignis and Gyarados, being cards that deal massive damage to either the board or any target, any enemy creature. And Hellfire, of course, is a very powerful damaging spell. But red has a few other things going for it. We have combat effects, which is very unique to red. No other color has it. I mean, there are some neutral cards that have combat, but if we just type combat, we have a card that is a combat creature that gives buffs to the next combat creature you summon. You have Shed and Brute and Grimguard, which deal damage to your opponent as a combat effect. Underground Boss and Kobold Warlord and Underground Brigand all have combat effects, and we have a card that buffs it's a +3/+0 to any creature, but it gives an extra health buff to creatures with combat effects. And of course, the main legendary that's used, Cypher, it doesn't have a combat effect. It doesn't say combat. It's a creature that gains stats as a result of battling with other creatures, usually wanting to kill them. The last thing that red has going for it is a hand cost reduction. So reducing the cost of cards in your hand. You've done with things like Ogre Dance, or with Blood Song, or with the very famous Bold Bargainer, in which there are decks built around this very one card, and that's a very powerful effect that is again unique to red. So in summary, red has damage, of course, combat effects, and hand cost reduction. Now move on to yellow. Yellow's main thing is flying. This is probably the thing that any new player will recognize most in yellow is flying. We have cards that give flying. We have a card that draws flying creatures, a card that buffs flying creatures, a creature that buffs flying creatures when you draw them. A card, one of the main legendaries, Khalim, is a flying creature. And yeah, they just have a lot of flying cards. Their Elemental is a flying card. And yeah, so flying is definitely a main attribute of yellow. We also have in yellow lots of cards with charge and haste. A lot of the cards that have haste have charge and vice versa. So I have like Windstorm Soldier. I guess actually that's the only one with flying, with a haste and charge rather. But definitely a very powerful set of effects, haste and charge. We have Halim that again has charge. A lot of cards with charge or that work with charge, such as Flash Wind, which if you have a creature with charge, or I guess Jump as well, which works pretty well. But Flash Wind allows your charge creatures to kind of, amplify the fact that they have that charge. And we also have, Haste is another big thing in yellow. And yeah, in yellow. We have Halim's Follower, a Radger Monk, Wind Soldier, all very powerful haste cards, and cards that work in conjunction with that haste, usually by working with the fact that you're attacking the opponent's orb. So Halim's Follower only has attack when you're attacking the orb, but we have Halim's Prayer, which is a card that you can only play if you've attacked the orb. You have cards that get buffs depending on how many times you've attacked the orb. I'm trying to see if I can find that card. Yeah, so Zealous Crusader, based on how many times you've attacked the orb. So these things work in conjunction with haste. Halim itself, when you attack the orb, gives you Halim's followers, which in turn have haste and added attack when they attack the orb. And then we also have the last thing for yellow. I might just make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Is Sacrifice, right? So yellow has quite a few cards that sacrifice. So we have a Shaitan Assassin, which gains protection if you sacrifice on the creature. Deathwalker, which you have to sacrifice a creature to summon it, and the more popularly used Demon Wrangler, which can buff a creature by sacrificing one, and usually a one with a last word effect. And we also have cards that can work in conjunction with this sacrificing, such as Annoying Gnat, which never goes away once you summon it, and Doomgate, Door to Oblivion, which gives you Ostrogoth if you sacrifice enough creatures. And again, with Soul Eater, the whole deck built around sacrificing. Green has quite a bit of sacrificing too with the last words, which is why we see green-yellow. But moving on to the specifics of the two color cards, let's start with Soul Eater. So Soul Eater, and this is again why these are all better than Icerock Behemoth, having more unique effects and being better representations of the two colors that they are. So we have the green-yellow card, at least at the time of this video. Maybe the more will be added in the future, but for right now, the green-yellow card is Soul Eater. It has Flying and Charge, which are again very yellow attributes, and gain +1/+1 for each friendly creature that has died this game. So the +1/+1 for each friendly creature, definitely a green thing by it getting buffs. You know, just remember that green's main thing is buffing stats. This thing has buffs its own stats. And for each friendly creature that has died this game, very much a green and yellow thing, having last word effects and sacrifice card, or cards that sacrifice other creatures you can use. This is definitely a very powerful late game finisher for the green-yellow sacrifice deck, and why I think it's one of the best cards that are of two colors, green and yellow. I also think that it's really good for having that unique effect. We don't see any other effect like this in the game. Alright, next one, Crackthorn Beast. It's a really good representation of the iconic things of green and red, which is buffing and dealing damage. It deals 4 damage, and it gives +4/+4 randomly split among allies. The dash 2 is kind of a green thing too, but ignoring that, yeah, that's just what it does. It's a unique way of combining the damaging and buffing. Obviously, damaging and buffing itself is not unique, but the way it's done in this card is unique. It makes it worth you doing green and red. Obviously, it's a powerful card, but again, Icerock Behemoth, I don't have a problem with its strength, just the fact that it doesn't have a unique effect and it doesn't represent its colors in the way that Crackthorn Beast does. All right, Apex Predator, it has jump, so very much a blue mechanic, and the gift, gain attack and life equal to any creatures, and it has buffs. So it has the buffs of green and the jump of blue, and it does it in a very unique way and makes it a very strong card that if you build a deck around it will really pay off. And again, so it's not just a good card, but a very unique effect that we don't see anywhere else in the game. Alright, Twin Soul Spirit. Twin Soul Spirit is the blue-yellow card. It has the flying of yellow, and I just want to mention not just the flying, but has this text, can be summoned adjacent to a friendly creature, which is an effect that another yellow card has, Halim's Skyguard. It's the very same effect and has the very same stats as Halim's Skyguard. So very much representative of yellow, and has the creation aspect of blue. You summon another one next to it. This is kind of like if you were to cast a free Aurora's Creation on it and then summon the card created by Aurora's Creation, right? So it's a very unique way of combining the aspects of blue-yellow. It definitely feels like a blue-yellow card, but has that unique effect of summoning another one. You know, it's twin soul. All right, is this the last one, or? Yeah, it is. All right. Scourge, Flame, Spectre. The last one, besides Icerock Behemoth, of course, has just a bunch of things: Flying, Haste, Charge, and the combat ability. So Flying, Haste, Charge are, again, all yellow things. And you might be saying, well, wait, aren't they just slapping tags on? Yes, but they're combining at least tags that are representative of blue and yellow. And we'll get back to Icerock Behemoth in a sec. But the combat ability, deal 3 damage to your opponent. The combat effect is very much red, and the ability itself should remind us of things like Shed and Brute and Grimguard, which are just cards that deal less damage than Scourge Flame Spectre, but have the same basic effect. So, Scourge Flame Spectre, although not as unique of an effect, the combination of everything makes it a very good representation of blue. Of red and yellow, not blue. A good representation of red and yellow. Icerock Behemoth, on the other hand, well, let's just look. It has Taunt, alright? Let's see what has Taunt in the game. We have a few red cards that have Taunt. No blue cards that have Taunt, of course, besides Icerock Behemoth itself. If anything, Taunt is a green attribute. I mean, green has more Taunt cards than any other color, and, you know, even more than neutral. And let's look at the other one, Protection. So let's see what cards have Protection. If anything, Protection is probably an attribute of neutral, as it has the more Protection cards than the other colors combined. There are no green ones. There's one blue card that gives Protection, and there's no red cards that give Protection other than, of course, again, Icerock Behemoth. So Icerock Behemoth doesn't really represent blue and red very well. And of course, again, its effect is just not very unique, and doesn't do anything unique, and is one of the reasons why it's such a weak card. So given all that, I'm just going to take another drink of water. Given all that, let's discuss ways that we could redesign the card so that it would be better thematically, it would fit better thematically as a blue and red card, and so that would have perhaps a more unique effect because of that combination. So the first one we have here, and these are again my suggestions, we'll go into other suggestions that are not mine later. The first one I have is Jump. Whenever this creature moves to a new space, deal 1 damage to your opponent. And again, I kept the stats just because it was easier to edit. But it's very likely that the stats would be changed or the cost would be changed. But I'm just looking at the text right now. So whenever this creature moves to a new space, deal 1 damage to your opponent. So this has Jump, of course. Well, which is very much a blue attribute, and it has an effect whenever it moves to new space, deal 1 damage to your opponent. A lot of creatures such as Bloodstone Sprite, and Bloodsting, this is all red cards, so it's definitely a red attribute that deal damage to your opponent based on certain effects. And the fact that it has Jump makes it kind of, you know, it's kind of, you can manipulate that movement, or you can use the land manipulation of blue to have it to do like more damage. But that's probably the worst of the bunch. We'll get into more interesting ones. Jump, whenever this creature moves to a new space, deal 2 damage to all adjacent enemies. So it has Jump, which is very much a blue thing, and it has kind of the effect, or exactly the effect, of Blazing Salamander every time it moves to a new space. And this could be very powerful because of the fact that it has Jump. So you can move it in ways to trade very efficiently with creatures. Next one we have is deal X damage randomly split among enemies, where X is the number of jump and combat creatures you summon this game. So it's kind of like Soul Eater, where it builds up all game based on certain conditions. And this condition is based on summoning a lot of jump and combat creatures. So you can like have some of these at the end of the game, deal massive amounts of damage, probably more than Hellfire if you do it enough. And it kind of requires you to build a deck that had a lot of jump and combat creatures. And yeah, so it's just a good representation of blue and red. Another one, Gift. All blue cards in your hand cost 7 less. All red cards in your hand cost 7 more. So you can wait until you have a lot of blue cards in your hand. You've expended a lot of your red cards, or just play a few more blue cards than red cards in general, and you get all the blue cards in your hand have their cost reduced. This is balanced by the fact that all the red cards in your hand, if you have any, would go up by 7, which is a lot. But there are a lot of powerful blue cards I feel would benefit a lot from cost reduction, such as Mirror Phantasm, Dreamweaver, Beirut, Windfall, or even Aurora's Dream. These will all be great ones for blue to get their cost reduction, but you have to build a deck around it, and you have to you run the risk of having the red cards in your hand, if you have any, get a massive increase in cost. So I think that, and again, the kind of cost reduction thing is a red attribute, but it's being applied to both blue and red. With Bold Bargainer, it's very much a red attribute. So I think it's a good representation. Maybe not as much of blue and red, but applying an attribute of red to powerful blue cards, right? All right, next one, Gift. Deal 3 damage to all adjacent creatures, enemy creatures, and then summon a 2/2 frog with jump on any space where an enemy dies. So this is an interesting one. So it has kind of a very powerful salamander effect. Obviously, again, the stats would be different. The cost might be different. But it's a very powerful blazing salamander effect as a gift. And then whenever a creature dies, it's different than Frogify. It summons a 2/2 frog with jump that you control in its place. So whenever an enemy creature dies on a tile, it gets immediately a frog summoned in its place. And this can be done very easily with the damaging effects of red, or just by its own effect of dealing 3 damage to all adjacent enemy creatures. So I think that's a really interesting way to combine the effects of red and blue. All right, next one, Combat. Move a land. So obviously a kind of simple way of doing it, but we have a lot of combat effects in red. We have land manipulation in blue. So I thought it'd be interesting to make it when a combat effect of just moving a land. In the Reddit post that I mentioned, there was someone who mentioned that this would be kind of hard to implement mechanically, and it'd be kind of a little awkward to do, like you attack and then you have to move a land right away. So it might not be the best way of combining those two effects, but I thought it would lead to some interesting plays. Right, next one, Combat. Transform a random creature you control into a random creature that costs 1 more. So it's kind of like a mini Orisei in that way. So whenever you attack another creature, another random creature that you control, perhaps even itself, transforms into a creature that costs 1 more. Not when you destroy a creature, whenever you attack. Yeah, did I say that? I think I said that right. Whenever you attack a creature, or you're attacked by another creature. Or when you attack anything, structures or the orb, for example. So that could be a very interesting effect. I think it's a good way to combine the combat effect of red with the kind of transformation effects of blue. And last one, that is of my suggestions, Combat. Transform the creature this behemoth battled with into a 2/2 frog with jump. So I imagine this as being not statted like this, but imagine like low attack but high health. And whenever it battles with a creature, and it will probably get multiple battles because of its high health. Let's say there's a pesky minion, like a Cypher maybe or something that's hard to deal with. It frogifies them, which can be a very powerful effect. Especially later on in the game when your opponent's kind of getting exhausted of resources. And yeah, so that's it for my suggestions. I'm going to go on to ones that other users in the Reddit post described. So we have Lou90 himself suggested a probably more balanced version of the one of kind of what I suggested, which is Jump, Battlecry, move a land. So it has Jump and Battlecry, move a land. That's kind of land manipulation of blue. And whenever this creature moves, deal 1 damage to adjacent creature. So it's kind of like has a mini Blazing Salamander effect, doing that kind of damage thing that red is best at, but only 1 damage instead of 2 or like 3 that I suggested on one of them. So it's probably a more balanced version. And again, the stats would probably be different. All right, next one, a user by the name of 5 Daydreams suggested a couple of things. The first one is Jump, so blue. Oh, I just want to say I think Lose is a really fair and balanced representation of blue and red. Again, using all the effects. But 5 Daydreams suggested first Jump, which is of course blue, and Combat, reduce the cost of a card in your hand by 2 Faeria. So this of course uses the cost reduction of red rather, but as a combat ability, which is interesting. And it's a slightly reduced cost reduction. It kind of reminds me of Ancient Herald by only reducing the cost by 2. But it has Jump, so it has that blue kind of thing going for it. And another one he suggested was This one, gift, turn an adjacent creature into 2/2 frog with jump. And last words, turn a random enemy creature into a 2/2 frog with jump. I don't think it's very representative of red. I mean, red I think has the most use out of the kind of adjacent thing. I guess they have a lot. They have Meteor and they have Bomb Slinger. It's kind of like a Bomb Slinger, but instead of dealing 4 damage, it frogifies an adjacent minion creature. I would assume only enemy creatures, though I guess you could, with the text as it is now, frogify one of your own creatures. And then when it dies, of course, it does another frogify. That might be slightly too powerful on a card, or it would have to have insanely weak stats. But I think that's an interesting way of doing it. So it's a cool way of combining red and blue. Now, I don't think that any of these are the ones that should necessarily, be the ones that replace the current text of Icerock Behemoth. But I think these would all be ones that would be steps in the right direction of having an Icerock Behemoth. Maybe it would be named differently, but an Icerock Behemoth that is better representative of its colors, blue and red, and has a much more unique effect. Right now it's really boring, not competitive, not powerful, it doesn't represent its colors very well. So I just think it could use a redesign. And those are some of my suggestions, some of the suggestions of other users. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any suggestions yourself, please leave them down in the comments. I know this is, I think, my first video on YouTube. Hopefully I will have other discussions like this in the future. Thank you guys for tuning into my channel. Hit like, subscribe, etc. Whatever I'm supposed to say that you're supposed to click on. And have a good one.